Shabbat Shalom. Let me set you the scene. You and your spouse have been happily married for many, many years. You feel a passionate love for them, as bright as that first day that you met, as powerful as the day that you stood under the chuppah. You love them with all of your heart, and you are convinced they love you with all of their heart as well. But it happens. One day you come home a little early, unexpectedly. You open the door and you hear sounds coming from the other room. You throw open the door, and there, in the midst of your own home, you find your spouse on the floor, deep in worship of Molech, worshiping an idol. You don't know where they've kept this idol all this time. You don't know when they began doing this. But there they've got an idol sitting there, propped up on your bed, and they are bowing down to it and offering up fire in front of this statue. The betrayal, the pain. So you grab them by the collar and you haul them before the Beit Din. And the Beit Din investigates, and they are unrepentant. That Molech is indeed the one true God, that Adonai has done nothing for them. And the Beit Din investigates further. Further witnesses come forward, say that indeed they had also seen this person engaged in worship, although they had not spoken until this time. And so, of course, your spouse is executed. Well, I mean, that is the appropriate response according to Parashat Reeh. Right? Earlier on in the Torah portion, before the part that we read publicly, but hopefully the part that you were reading privately, it says that if you find somebody engaged in idolatry, even if they are in your very family, that you are meant to put a stop to it, that you are meant to deal with it according to the law. Now, I'm guessing by the looks around the room that most of you are perhaps a little uncomfortable with the idea of capital punishment for somebody who was worshiping an idol, even flagrantly, even unrepentantly. Most of you don't seem like you would probably have grabbed them by the collar and dragged them before the court. Am I wrong on that assessment? Or all of you are gung-ho and are going to go home and search through the sock drawer of your spouse to see if there happens to be an idol there? Yeah, well, I think maybe we got more suspicion than I was expecting, but my guesses are that you do not rate this quite as high of a betrayal as if, well, what you probably thought I was going for, as if you had come home and found your spouse in the arms of a lover. That would have been a true betrayal. Or perhaps you had come home and found them in the midst of some corruption, some embezzlement and terrible exploitation, stealing money from orphans, things like that. That you might have been willing to drag them in front of the court for. But this, I mean, it's not great, but is it really something that the Torah has to tell us is a capital crime, right up there alongside murder or kidnapping? I mean, isn't it their choice? I mean, maybe I don't want to stay married to them anymore. But is this the kind of thing to turn someone in for? Well, let's flip it around a little bit, because I want to see whether or not you are completely reticent to use violence when there is a need. And we'll do a few parallels, and then we'll talk about why they are parallels. So imagine you are a doctor. For some of you, that's not hard. You have been doctors for quite a long time. And you are working with a patient, and it is clear, having come in, that they have gangrene in their foot. And if nothing is done, because it's not being responsive to the antibiotics you're trying, it will eventually consume their entire body, and they will die. Do you amputate? Or do you say, no, we can't amputate. That would be terrible. How could you imagine destroying part of their beautiful body? Let's just sit back and watch. No. You would get out a knife, right? I'm assuming they have more sophisticated means nowadays, but you would take the foot. Imagine you are a firefighter, again, not too hard for some people in the room, and you are fighting a deadly blaze shooting through the wilderness, and the order comes down that the only way to stop it is to create a fire break, but that fire break is going to run right through the middle of an area that has residential homes. You'll evacuate everyone, and then you are going to drive those homes into the ground so the fire will not be able to continue in its path. Okay? Or do we let the fire burn? Do we create a fire break even if it's painful? Or do we allow the fire to continue to consume more and perhaps even take the lives of not just firefighters, but others as well? Most of us are okay with the idea of, in the right circumstances, making a fire break. What if you are a general and there is a dangerous mission? The foe, however, is a dangerous foe. Are you willing to send troops into battle knowing that some of them will not come back? That there is no 100% guarantee that every soldier who goes out will be able to return? You know there will be loss of life, at least among your own, while trying to stop such an enemy as this. Are you willing to make that decision, that action? Now, what do all these parallels have to do with our idol worshiper on the floor? I mean, we can't really compare gangrene or a fire or a violent enemy to idolatry, can we? Well, the Torah seems to. The Torah seems to hold idolatry in exactly that same status. It seems to believe that idolatry is one of the worst possible things that can happen. In fact, it goes so far as to say that if you were to find a city that had been completely consumed by idolatry, that you would make a fire break of that city, destroying the entire town, razing it to the foundation, and burying those within it who had committed the sin of idolatry. Now, our sages may have argued about whether or not such an edict was ever carried out. The majority says no. But it is there to tell us the severity of idolatry in the eyes of God and the eyes of Torah. But what's so bad about idolatry? Why do we have to be so careful about these false prophets that get mentioned at the beginning? I mean, isn't it nice when someone comes and says they're speaking for God? Isn't it nice when somebody feels a passion for something divine, even if it is Molech or Baal or Zeus or whoever? I mean, come on, it's the personal, passionate choice. What's so bad about this anyway? Who cares what the prophet says if it's not what Torah said? Big deal, right? Live and let live. That's what I say. Well, the Torah doesn't seem to have that view, because the Torah has seen what false prophets and idolatry do. It has seen the destruction that these ideologies have wreaked upon humanity. Remember, our ancestors lived among idolaters. They saw the suffering that was caused. They saw the pain in families ripped apart by barbarous rites. They saw children sacrificed to various gods. They saw communities which had hierarchies of suffering that allowed the exploitation across the entire spectrum of society. And the Torah says, no, that cannot be allowed to fester. Like a gangrenous limb, it must be removed. It must be cut out. Now, I am guessing, it's just a guess, that most of you are still not going to get together for the Let's Hunt for Idol Worshippers group. That you're still uncomfortable with the idea of violent policing against idolatry. That you're not quite ready to grab someone by the collar and throw them in front of the Beit Din for worshiping a stick. I get that. But I'd like you to, if you're not willing to be part of that element, to consider what the Torah suggests is the prevention. This is the remedy, right? This is the amputation in the time of gangrene. This is the fire break in the time of fire. This is the battle group that is in the time of war. But what can we do to prevent gangrene in the first place? What can we do to prevent the fire? What can we do to prevent the war so that this unpalatable option isn't even needed? Well, when it comes to idolatry, we have to look at where idolatry festers most within a community that has shunned idolatry up to this point. When we look into Judaism, where did idolatry become most prevalent? Where did people choose to listen to false prophets that allowed them to rot away from the good path, from the proper society, and into all of the problems that our people have had? Well, the second half of our Torah portion tells us, when you leave people oppressed, you don't forgive their debts, you keep them as in perpetual servitude. When you are celebrating, you don't invite the stranger, the widow, the orphan into your feasts. You allow the perversion of justice within your community such that those who are at the receiving end turn away from the supposed root of justice, Adonai, looking for an alternative. After all, if the chosen representatives of God, the leadership, whether it be secular or the Kohanim, are not delivering justice, then you will find justice somewhere else. This is the claim, of course, of Absalom against his father David, which allows him to lead a revolution. It is the claim again and again in multiple generations that the community had become corrupt, and so people turn away from God. Which is also convenient because once you've turned away from God, then when you are the victim, you can turn around and perpetrate crimes against those who had oppressed you. Because after all, that seems to be the way of the rest of the world. Whereas God would have told you, yes, you've been victimized, seek justice, not revenge. The idols tell you, so surprisingly, because you made them, that revenge is in fact the best thing you could offer. By preventing the suffering of others, we are creating a prevention against idolatry. God doesn't want us to punish idol worshipers. He wants us to root out the rot that will destroy our society. But rather than root it out one person at a time, God gives us mitzvot in order to prevent anyone from feeling they should ever turn to an idol or false prophet in the first place. To create a society around the words of Torah will make it so that we are inoculated, that we have a vaccine within us that means that when the words of a false prophet or someone peddling idolatry comes up to us, they will bounce off harmlessly. We will be immune to all of their deceptions. We will be immune to all of their seductions. And when they come, we'll tell them where to go. But that only works if we actually build the society that Torah has told us to build. When we don't harden our hearts against those in need, as the reading mentioned this morning. When we don't close our hand against those that are becoming desperate. When we make sure that no one gets desperate in the first place by remitting debts, by ending servitude, by celebrating hand in hand at the different festivals of our people, then no one thinks of turning to idolatry. Because everybody knows that what we have built is beautiful and good. It is very easy and understandable to get caught up in the punishments for idolatry and to see in them something that feels so barbarous and antiquated. How dare a person be punished for what they think? But if you understand what idolatry does to a society, then you can understand why the Torah made those edicts when they did. But more importantly, if you can understand what idolatry does to a society that made those edicts necessary, then you should be moved not to stamp out idolatry, but prevent it in the first place. You should be moved to action. If you are not willing to be there as part of the after effect cure, then be there as part of the prevention. Do not say, oh, I would never, ever do anything to stop another person who was engaged in idolatry. Instead say, I would never allow myself to stand by and let a person descend to the point where they will begin to find idolatry and false prophets attractive. That is what this parasha is telling us in its juxtapositions of different mitzvot, is that we have a way to prevent this. We know what it means to reach out to those in need, and we know that this is more important than just making somebody happy. That this is the way that we ensure the strength of our society and of our community. This is how we fulfill what God has asked us to do. And this is more important than dragging someone by the collar. Instead, we lift them by the hand. Shabbat Shalom.